Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Chamber of the Wraith. My name is Brian, and this is going to be a busy day for me today, because I'm working on not one, not two, but 5 videos today. I even have a list of them right there. 2 of them you'll be seeing today. In particular, the first one I want to be talking about is a Chamber of the Wraith video, which that's usually my analysis whole shebang. I mean, my channel is about gameplay and all of that, but when you see that title card, Chamber of the Wraith, then you know I'm going to be doing a long-winded discussion about something, and maybe it'll be entertaining, maybe it'll be educational, or maybe you'll want to punch me in the face with brass knuckles. But today we're going to be talking about, as you saw from the title, microtransactions in gaming. And of course, with microtransactions, you'll get a lot of reactions, some positive, some negative, but the one that you most commonly associate with this discussion is this one.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Yeah, that's a lot of what you'd be hearing when you hear the microtransaction debate. And can you really blame him? Microtransactions, if you bring them up in the gaming community, get immediately toxified. Immediately. People look to microtransactions as what's wrong with gaming, and they're ruining games, and why can I not play my games without being asked to spend money? Even though I already spent over $100 on this game in some cases. Like it is the case with me and Injustice 2. Seriously, the Ultimate Edition up here in Canada is $130. That ain't cheap! But there are a few things I want to talk about with microtransactions and associating with microtransactions. Specifically, this list. And I'll be looking to this for all of my points. Starting with number 1. Don't you remember the arcades? Yeah, we're starting with the arcades. Now, I, being born in 1997, I know, I'm giving a little bit too much personal information. Yeah, don't worry about it. Me, being born in 1997, I had never stepped foot into a proper arcade. You know, the ones where everybody's crowding around a Street Fighter Alpha machine or something. The closest that would have been at the movie theater with, like, the Jurassic Park, shoot down the dinosaurs! And weirdly enough, there's a haircut place not too far from where I'm at that has a Street Fighter Alpha machine. It's really weird. I digress. But with that in mind, remember from the arcades were not cheap. And while I've never had to experience a proper arcade, I've played games that have involved arcades because they've come from that era. For instance, while I have not played a whole lot of it and I kind of want to get back into it and all that jazz, I did play Street Fighter 3 Third Strike for a little while. That is a very arcadey game. Unfortunately, I never even did get to the arcade mode, but you can even look online for arcade-era games. Street Fighter 2, I don't know why I keep saying Street Fighter 2, let's pick something else. Soul Calibur, Tekken, hell, in Japan, Tekken 7 was in the arcades for a couple of years before its final release date this June, over here. It's a little bit nuts, but with arcades, you have to spend money to play the game. It's the ultimate microtransaction when you think about it. You pop a quarter in, you get through a few fights, and then you run into a boss that is just kicking your ass, and you need to dump money and money and money, quarters after quarters, into trying to beat this thing. You will see great examples of this, like in the early Marvel vs. Capcom games, where you have a massive difficulty spike, because they want to milk you of your monies. That is totally what it's about. And now we have moved on since then with the consoles. The consoles did quite literally kill the arcade to almost dead and still just being really obscure and finding them in movie theaters and such. But with that in mind, sorry, weird throat. Microtransactions of a sort have always been around when you think about it. Here, let's put it this way. The best way to play games for a long time, mid-'80s, early '90s, even into the mid-'90s, right up until, the PlayStation 1 showed up, and the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and the Sega Genesis. The Sega Genesis? Yeah, I think it was the Sega Genesis. Those beefy consoles that could actually play games really well. Particularly the PlayStation 1 because, A, of its cheap price at the time, $300 versus $500, and also because of great mascot games like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon, and others. But this isn't a discussion about consoles at all. I'm getting sidetracked here, like I often do. But with being able to just buy the games right away for $30 or $40, buying a unit that can play those games and more for $300 to $500, depending on what you were picking up, the arcades died out. Because arcades were not the best way to play games. They never were. It's just that it took technology about a decade to catch up to them. Nowadays, we have the PlayStation 4, which is able to make interactive movies. That's what games are now. They are interactive movies. Horizon Zero Dawn, Metal Gear Solid 5. When Death Stranding comes out, that'll be something. The Last of Us, for Christ's sakes. So, with the death of the arcade came the death of expectations of having to pay to play games. Kind of. Outside of the obvious, oh hey, I'm going to have to buy my game, but I don't have to pay any more money. I've dropped $30 on it, I can play it all I want. And I can't blame them, really. I really can't blame people for liking that, obviously. I grew up with it. I never had to touch the arcades. But then it kind of leads to another point that I'm really curious about how you guys feel. Expansion packs. For something a little more recent that some of you who were my age or a little older or even a little younger might remember from games like The Sims or even one of my personal favorites, Zoo Tycoon and its sequel, were the expansion packs. These right here, see that right there? It says, well, the lighting's not that great, but it says, expansion pack requires Zoo Tycoon 2, the original, to play. Now, these were like $20 to $30 extensions to already existing games that were hugely full of content at the best of times, like with Zoo Tycoon, and other times it seems like they were lacking with The Sims, at least from my personal opinion. I mean, no wonder this, Sims 2 had 20 expansion packs. But with Zoo Tycoon, I'll be using as an example because I played a fuckload of that when I was a kid. Zoo Tycoon 2 and the original Zoo Tycoon had several expansion packs. Zoo Tycoon, the original, only had 2. Dinosaur Digs and Marine Mania. Now, these were 80% of the way to being their own games, with their own buildings and their own fence types, and most importantly, their own creatures. They even had their own maps and campaigns. All that they were missing were maybe a few essential buildings that Dinosaur Digs never really kind of built, and really the kind of and really just that. And then next thing you know, you have your own game in Dinosaur Digs. And but because it's under the Zoo Tycoon naming, it became an expansion pack for, I think it was $20, and boom, you're in business. And there are even their own references and cheat codes. Remember those? Marine Mania was very much the same way, if not even more full of effort that was put into it, because with the tanks, for example, you can make them taller and shrink them down and all of this important stuff, plus a bunch of animals and even marine shows. There was a lot of stuff in Marine Mania for the original Zoo Tycoon. And even in Zoo Tycoon 2, they also had their own thing and all of this stuff. Now, Zoo Tycoon 2 did have what I call filler expansion packs. Basically expansion packs that never really did anything, but I mean, they were there. The biggest one that strikes out in my mind is African Adventure. Basically, it was just 20 extra animals, some extra maps in a campaign, and an extra campaign or two. That was it. And they didn't really add any new technology like Endangered Species, Marine Mania, or Extinct Animals did for Zoo Tycoon 2. They never really kind of branched out in the maps. I mean, they kind of did a lot of African stuff because this is African Adventure, but honestly, other than that, it wasn't all that much that was in there. And the expansion pack can kind of be likened to some of the DLC that you see today. For instance, with Batman Arkham City, you had the DLC that was Harley Quinn's Revenge. It was a $20 expansion that included a couple of extra hours of story that happened after the main game, where you got to play as Robin, and you also had like extra challenges and riddles and stuff like that. It was all contained in Harley Quinn's Revenge, and it was pretty neat. And then you also have the little expansions that came with Robin as Robin as DLC and Nightwing as the DLC characters, where they'd have their own challenge maps. And of course, being full-fledged playable characters, except for voice lines in between rounds and stuff, they had their own moves, their own gadgets, their own detective modes. They had all of their own stuff, which was pretty neat. I really have to commend them to that. Bravo. And of course, there's always, with expansion packs, you always get the duds. And one of the duds that it was more of an expansion to the original story mode. Of course, this is a game made by this was a game by Capcom. So this is a game by Capcom in the early 2010s. So this shouldn't surprise you. But Asura's Wrath had 5 chapters of the actual full story mode hidden behind a $20 paywall. Uh-huh. Yeah, no, that's a no. That's a no. No bueno. Do not want. So, that was definitely a huge problem. Like, that was definitely problematic and something that you really did not want. That kind of expansion, kill it. But stuff like with Zoo Tycoon, which would also eventually get what's known as the Complete Edition, which would have all of the expansion packs, like this Red Dead Redemption copy that I have right here, which also, oddly enough, has Undead Nightmare and multiplayer as the extension. Undead Nightmare, speaking of which, another expansion pack. Shit, who'd have thought? So, now we're going to have to move a little bit forward onto the timeline and talk about DLC. Downloadable content. This is kind of what I feel is the intermediary step. Moving in to DLC. Oh yes! Gaming's favorite scapegoat, DLC. Now, granted, of course, microtransactions aren't that far behind, but we're getting to that. Right now, we're going to be talking about DLC. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Which I just realized is another point on my list I wanted to do separately, but because DLC is still, like, hyper recent, still something that we got to talk about. For instance, good DLC should expand the game in something that does not corrupt the story mode, or even takes advantage of a certain mode. So, for instance, I'll be using Arkham City as an example because I'm doing the memories of Arkham City right now, so a lot of this is, like, in my head right now. So, Harley Quinn's Revenge, the Nightwing bonus challenge maps, the Robin bonus challenge maps, as well as those 2 characters, which, by the way, Robin and the challenge maps were bundled, same with Nightwing. And was Catwoman DLC, or did she just come with the game? I think I pre-ordered it, so it just came with the game. But we'll say Catwoman also came with as well. That is good DLC. Why? It doesn't corrupt the main story, which still has a shit ton to do. And it just expands upon what's already there for a fair price, because they're bundles. Mortal Kombat 9 and X also are examples of, well, we'll say decent DLC, because you can debate on the prices of these, but Mortal Kombat 9, right now, as far as DLC for fighters goes, is, as far as I know, probably the best example of, like, decent DLC in a fighting game. Where in MK9, the characters were about $5 a piece, and you got Freddy Krueger, Kenshi, Scarlet, who is brand new to the Mortal Kombat franchise, who I really wanted to see in MKX, damn it. But maybe with Atrocitus in the game, maybe we'll see more Scarlet in MK11. We'll see about that. And also Rain. So what is that? 2 fan favorites, 1 brand new character, and guest characters. And a guest character, which I know a lot of people don't like guest characters either. But guest characters are talk for another time. Mortal Kombat X did something very similar. It's just that they expanded upon it quite a bit because they had 4 guests: Jason, Leatherface, Predator, and Alien, and 4 Mortal Kombat characters: Baraicho, Triborg, who's basically 3 robots in one, who's basically 4 characters in one because he's the different robots. They just kind of share some normals, but they all play pretty differently. Tanya and Baraicho. Wait, I already said Baraicho. Who was I missing? Tremor. There we go. Those are decent DLC options. Each character is about $5 a piece, or you could buy their combat packs for $20 to $30. That is not too bad, actually. And of course, if you pre-ordered, you get the first. If you pre-ordered a certain thing, you get your first combat pack. Yada yada yada. We'll talk about pre-orders later on in the video, but those are decent DLC. What's bad DLC is shit that Capcom's done over the past several years, and while they've been trying to get better, I can tell they wanted to try and get better. They're fucking it up. For instance, so we're going to quickly talk about a little game called Street Fighter Cross Tekken, which had a massive DLC conspiracy when it was coming out, because its DLC characters were technically not DLC. Technically speaking, they were already on the disc. Yeah, that's right. These characters were already on the disc. All of the characters that you wanted to play, including some of the wackier guests like Cole McGrath from Infamous, which was exclusive to the PlayStation 3, Bad Box Art Mega Man, and Pac-Man, who is oddly riding a Mokujin-style mech. Weird, but whatever. Those guys were all on the disc already. And Capcom was charging you money to basically get an unlock code. That was not good of them. And then other companies kind of started to follow in their footsteps with similarly shady practices in DLC. And then Capcom's like, okay, whoa, we gotta back this up a little bit. So what did they do for Street Fighter V? They mess up. Because with Street Fighter V, you had training mode, a weak story mode, survival mode, like a weak pre-story mode, a survival mode, and online. And that was basically it. That's why for the longest time, I never did a Shoryuken Saturday for Street Fighter V. I only did like the one little episode because of the little versus thing that came in an update, if I recall correctly. I'm probably wrong on that, and that also existed, but I only did the one episode for the original Street Fighter V because I wanted to kind of at least show that I give a damn about this game. But oh my goodness, I could not bring myself to do it for the longest time. And then they brought in Akuma. I had fun with Akuma, and then from then on, I got into the Shoryuken Saturday that you can see every Saturday on my channel. Now I know that sounds like advertising, and technically it is, but I just wanted to make that point. What they did right with DLC is that they kind of made DLC bleed into microtransaction-y territory. They were initially going to have it where you would just have fight money, and then you would buy Zenny, which is basically real-world currency, which is basically a currency in the game that you buy with real money that you can use to kind of just speed things up and get whatever you wanted out of the gate. Now, with the Season 2 update, they kind of just fixed it where it's just like, you can either do it with fight money, or you can buy them with real-world money. And that kind of a system, it's a good idea. Think about it. If the game is good and you just want to play the game, and that helps you unlock currency that lets you unlock stuff, that is not an old thing. It sounds recent, but it isn't. It's actually rather old, and I can prove it to you. These are the 3D generation Mortal Kombat games. Deadly Alliance, Deception, Shaolin Monks, which was like an action-adventure story mode, not an actual fighting game, where you got to play as these two. It was interesting. And Mortal Kombat Armageddon. These games all came out on the PlayStation 2. As a matter of fact, if I recall correctly, Mortal Kombat Deception came out sometime in 2003? 2004. Okay, so Mortal Kombat Deception came out in 2004. These games had an almost identical system to Street Fighter V. The only real difference was that they didn't charge you coins, because even though the PlayStation 2 kind of had internet connectivity, it wasn't able to get access to a PlayStation 2 PlayStation Store, because that wasn't a thing. And I bet you if Midway did that, if Midway thought about that and it was able to, they would have done this in a heartbeat. But what you can do is you can go into the crypt, and by winning coins through fighting and doing the arcade mode and the conquest mode, which I believe was actually a deception thing, you can get characters and concept art and all of these neat little things, but you still used a currency that you earned by playing the game, just like fight money in Street Fighter V. Granted, Street Fighter V kind of let you... Granted, Street Fighter V lets you buy things with real money so you can get them right away, and there's a bit of a debacle whether that's a good thing or not. But really, the whole idea of currency to unlock things isn't new. We've had it for over a decade. Hell, one of my favorite games of all time, Godzilla Save the Earth for PlayStation 2, has exactly the same thing, where you get points that you can then use to buy new arenas, concept art, and new monsters to play as. It's not that different. And with that in mind, now we're bleeding into straight up microtransactions, which is kind of the heart of this topic. Which is good, because we've bled into it and I never actually really made a point about microtransactions. But I'm going to kind of talk about we're going to kind of bleed two topics in one. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and where I stand on the issue. Now, I understand you've probably had enough of hearing a Canadian neckbeard nerd babble on about microtransactions, but we're only about halfway through, folks. I'm dead serious. At least halfway through my list. Now, we're going to talk about... this is kind of where I just start throwing topics out the window, and this is kind of more of a chapter thing. We're going to start with the good microtransactions, the bad microtransactions, and the ugly microtransactions. Now, you hear good microtransactions and look at me like, fuck, are you high? But I'm not, actually. I am not high. Microtransactions most often are associated with mobile devices, specifically mobile free-to-play games like Clash of Clans, Clash Royale, Mortal Kombat X Mobile, Injustice 1 and 2 Mobile. These kinds of games where they're free to download, but you better cough up some money if you want some of the content, me boyo. And now, I make them sound really bad, but that is the worst case scenario where you have to pay money in order to win. This is what's known as a pay-to-win microtransaction. And it's what a lot of people with Injustice 2 are worried about. Specifically with these mother boxes, which I'm going to quickly throw up a few examples of them and explain something about Injustice 2 that I really appreciate. Specifically when it comes to these mother boxes, it's that they give you gear, which gear in this game allows you to buff your stats. And the thing with that is that people immediately got worried about this when it was announced that gear was going to be the game's main gimmick. Oh crap, are we gonna be able to buy gear with real money? What kind of gear can we buy? Are we going to have to worry about a pay-to-win situation where people who make thousands of dollars just buy the best gear and immediately stomp on people? NetherRealm was quick to dispel those fears. You cannot buy mother boxes or gear with real money. You can't. The only way that you can kind of buy them is with credits that you earn by playing the game, by selling excessive pieces of gear, and the like. These credits cannot be bought with real money, and there's no real intention of letting these things be bought with real money, because that would be stupid. Now, there is a currency you can buy with real money, and it's called the Source Crystal. And you use these Source Crystals specifically in order to buy shaders, which are colors, or Premier skins. Now, as far as I know, there's no real way to unlock Premier skins, except for maybe beating the, boss Premier skin on certain multiverses. But I can't tell you if that's the case or not, A, because I bought all the I bought all the Premier skins, and B, I'm not going to go against one of those things again, because even though it's only one challenge, it's next to impossible to take them on. Because they're the most difficult, and they employ the top tier strategies in order to take you down. It's, I tells you, it ain't fun. But that's all you can spend your real money on outside of DLC characters like Darkseid and maybe unlocking Brainiac without having to beat the story mode. That's all you're spending your real money on is colors and skins. And with that in mind, with all that we have talked about, we're going to have to start talking about the bad microtransactions, because they do exist. For instance, microtransactions where you can get credits in a game that it doesn't really work with. What I mean is that Deus Ex Mankind Divided, or I can't remember the name of the Assassin's Creed game specifically, but those games both don't work well with microtransactions because they're a self-contained story. There's nothing to really expand upon. The best you could do is maybe an expanded story in DLC that doesn't really add on too much, or really rather, that adds on to the story, but it doesn't affect the main story in any real way, shape, or form, so you're not feeling left out. You can't allow yourself to buy current credits or Praxis kits or anything like that. In fact, hang on. This game kind of went by the wayside. Dante's Inferno. This is a God of War clone set during the Crusades, which is also weirdly based off of a poem? I don't understand. But you could buy experience points in this game with real money. I'm not making that up. You could buy souls, which you get by killing demons and stuff, and you use those souls to upgrade your abilities. Now, this game, oddly enough, was produced by EA, another infamous company when it comes to things like microtransactions and DLC. Now, this game came out in 2010. This game is 7 years old, and only now is what it has done being talked about with other games like Deus Ex, like the Assassin's Creed game, which I still can't remember the name of. Those are bad microtransactions, by the way. You should not be able to buy experience points. You just shouldn't be able to. That's a no-no. That would be like Ratchet & Clank coming out and saying, hey, if you pay $20, we'll give you 30,000 bolts so that you can buy that new weapon. Please, for the love of God, Insomniac, please do not do that. I don't want you to sully the Lombax's good name. And then we have the ugly. And now the ugly are, I kind of jokingly call these macro transactions instead of microtransactions because they're huge. A microtransaction, to me, at the most, is like in Mortal Kombat X, you spend $20, get 130 souls or whatever the hell it is. I haven't played the game in a while because my device is dead. Or at least not really functional. However, in both Mortal Kombat X Mobile and in Jurassic World, there are examples of microtransactions that range in the triple digits. I'm not joking. Like, for me, remember, because I'm Canadian and money for me sucks, a package of 850 souls, or a package of 1.5 million coins, with a K, obviously, is $121.13. And Jurassic World is even worse. Now, granted, obviously, these are there just for the people who are just going to spend big and don't give a damn about their money. Now, you could justify that. You could, in theory. I mean, it's not the best argument in the world, but It's an argument, I suppose. But we really need to talk about Jurassic World's microtransactions. Now, I thought it was bad when the Mosasaur happened. For those who don't know, there was a Mosasaur. There was a thing to get the Mosasaur, which was originally a tournament-exclusive creature, which I hate the tournaments in Jurassic World, but I digress. And it cost, it was like $99.99. And unlike Mortal Kombat X, it doesn't adjust for how, the currency does not adjust for how much it is before you go to buy it. So a card pack that is $6.99 would be $8.04, actually, because that's how much they would be charged and all that jazz. Now, I had bought earlier 200 Dino Bucks for $1.49 just because I kind of needed them just to speed things along because I had an event to do. And with that, I was going to snapshot this price. Now, Google Play is a little bit sneaky in that when you buy something from a game, you don't have to enter your password again for another 30 minutes. Okay? Oh yeah, you know where this is going. Now, to snapshot on a Samsung phone, you would hold the power button and the menu button at the same time. I didn't have my case on at the time. And I went to snapshot it, except somehow, without turning the device off, it was probably because I was holding it to bring up that menu, I accidentally hit buy. And there went $125 of my real-world money to a mobile game. Oh my god, was I livid! Unfortunately, because I did actually, push the button and whatever, I'm not gonna, go after Ludia for my money, because I can't. This happened almost a year ago, so it's not like it's going to really matter. But, and besides, in their terms of agreements or something, they'll probably say somehow that is my fault. And to a degree it is, but whatever. That is my microtransaction horror story. Quick side note, do you guys have any microtransaction horror stories that you want to talk about? You accidentally bought something that was too much, or maybe if you're one of my older friends who has a kid, your kid got a hold of your phone and suddenly spent hundreds of dollars of your money on shit that don't matter. I'd like to hear what you guys think, seriously. But these are the ugly microtransactions, and what's really weird is that Injustice 2 kind of has an ugly microtransaction in buying 150,000 source crystals for $66.99. And I say it's weird because it's not that bad. You'll have to do the math on this, but it's 100,000 source crystals and 50,000 bonus crystals. Really, they're just saying this so that they could convince you to buy it more. But for real, that is the most expensive thing that you're going to buy in Injustice 2 with real money, as far as I know, except for maybe the Ultimate Pack. But the Ultimate Pack is more worth it because you'll get access to the 9 DLC characters as they come out, and the Premier skins and Darkseid and all of that jazz. Because it is a game that you spend real money on. I think that is why. And I think this is where the main meat and potatoes of the problem resides. Why am I spending real-world money on a game I already spent real-world money on? I can see why this is a problem, believe me. And in a way, it kind of is. Why would they do this? And the obvious and probably right answer is money. NetherRealm loves their money. Well, rather, their publishers, WB, do. And NetherRealm is hugely successful. Their DLC is priced reasonably, is cool because it's new characters, hell, Red Hood's coming out soon for Injustice 2. When exactly, we're not too sure. My guess is either on the 3rd of June or on the first Tuesday of June. Those are my guesses. And everybody's excited about that, and people are going to drop big bucks on that. And the microtransactions, they're kind of just in there just because NetherRealm's riding a trend. A lot of game companies are going to be riding this trend. Square Enix is riding this trend with Deus Ex. Who made Assassin's Creed? Ubisoft is following that trend with Assassin's Creed. It's a trend that everybody's following that is on the rise. And that's because of how successful they are in mobile games. Don't sell mobile games short. They are changing the gaming landscape, for better or for worse. Now, yeah, we are going to be talking about the success of mobile games and how they've influenced the console gaming market. Now, a lot of people will say that mobile gaming isn't really gaming. It's just the casual's excuse for playing games. While I was never around in the arcade days, I can assume that there was a very similar argument for arcade players going against console players. You weren't really gamers. You never went to the arcade and spent quarters and had to go against other people. You just had to be in the basement. That kind of talk. But now that consoles are the norm, we have to talk about mobile games and how they're making a rise. King makes billions with a B of dollars from their free-to-play games through all the microtransactions that they make. It's insanity how much money these games make these days. And even console games can't really compete with that. As far as I know, there are very few billion-dollar games out there. The most notable one being Far Cry? No. Grand Theft Auto 5. Why did I think Far Cry 5? I don't know. But on the real, with Grand Theft Auto 5 making $1 billion in 3 days, it is, as of right now, the most successful console game, and PC game by extension, on the market. And it doesn't... And King is making more money off of a free-to-play game about crushing candy. And its sequels. Yes, Candy Crush has sequels. Just like how Angry Birds has an official sequel. It's a little bit insane. But with microtransactions being insanely successful and making a shite ton of money, it's little wonder that we're seeing these microtransactions in the main gaming market. And now I mentioned the casual versus hardcore aspect. And, well, let's dive into that a little bit, shall we? I, like a lot of things in life, do not fall into the hardcore or the casual aspect. I'm in the middle, somewhere. And I say this because I play a lot of games. And I play a lot, and I know several things. You could argue honestly, the closest thing I am to a hardcore player in is God of War, because I know a lot of where to find the secrets and all of that. At least I have the presence of mind to look around and think about where they might be. And I do play a lot of Mortal Kombat and Injustice. I'm just not that good. Seriously, put me in an online environment, I probably have a 50% chance of winning. Those aren't very good. Those, relatively speaking, are not very good odds. And this isn't ranked. We're talking about this is going against like people from all walks of life, for the casuals and the hardcore. Now, with DLC in fighting games, it's a little bit different from DLC in other games, because a lot of the DLC in fighting games are characters with usually unique special moves, unique ways to place their normals, how their combos work. And outside of watching videos online, one of the best ways to know how to beat a character is to play that character, if even for a short period of time, to see what the challenges are with that character, where they're strong and where they're weak. And a lot of times, especially I've noticed with Injustice 2, I talk about that a lot because that's kind of like the big thing right now, is a lot of people bought the Ultimate Edition just so that they can have everything right out of the gate when it comes out, so that they are ready to learn those characters and how to take them down. For the longest time, one of the launch roster characters, Deadshot, was a huge problem because one of the top players of NetherRealm Games, Sonic Fox, went on a 70+ win streak in ranked with nothing but his Deadshot because of how good his zoning was. And people started to complain about that because they thought that was too strong. Injustice, unlike Mortal Kombat, has much more emphasis on zoning and projectiles and getting past them. They even have a couple of new tools like the meter burn roll. And most characters tend to have a way to kind of get through projectiles. Grodd can make himself projectile invulnerable for a short time with his trait. Brainiac can leap across the screen with his tendril launch thing. Superman has an air dash and multiple projectiles. You get the idea. Now, the reason why I bring all of this into the microtransactions and DLC debate is because 9 characters will be coming out for Injustice 2 that are DLC. 3 of them that we know for sure: Red Hood, Starfire, and Sub-Zero. And learning these characters could be key. You don't know which of these DLC characters are going to be the top tier threat for a little while. And learning how to beat them, the best way for some people is just to buy them so that we can learn them. And that's where a lot of this is coming in. Now, with the microtransaction system, does it appeal more to casuals? Yeah, it does. Because, for instance, unlocking Brainiac for $8 means you don't have to waste your time in the story mode. Which, wait, hang on, that's an example of the opposite. What was I thinking? I don't script these, by the way. I just have my list. But basically what I'm trying to say is what I was going to say, before I screwed it up, was before the hardcores get on their high horse saying that these microtransactions appeal only to the casual market, only to the guys who are just going to spend their money on the crystals and just going to spend their money, and I'm a hardcore player, I don't have to spend money. Really? Do you think that the top tier players of Injustice 2, your Perfect Legends, your Sonic Foxes, and all of these, are going to waste their time with the story mode? Not likely. Most of the time that they will spend is in the lab, learning their characters and figuring out what to do. If they're going to blaze through the story mode, which is only a couple of hours, sure. But a much, much faster way to get Brainiac is just to drop $6 or $8, get Brainiac right away, and then learn him right away. There's no need to worry about. There's no need to be like, oh, well, I have to play the story mode in order to play Injustice 2 and waste valuable lab time. Because of how Injustice 2 puts its stories, they're usually 5, 10, 15-minute cutscenes with let's say a chunk of the story mode is about 20 minutes long, each chapter. You might get 5 to 8 minutes of gameplay out of those 20 to 30 minutes of straight gameplay, and there are 12 chapters in Injustice 2, and a few of them let you choose the character to play as. Catwoman vs. Cyborg, for example. There are 16 characters that you play as in Injustice 2 in the story mode. And at least I believe there's 16. There's somewhere in that neighborhood of how many characters there are to play as in Injustice 2. Most fighting game people are character loyalists. They're loyalists to 1, 2, or 3 characters that cover all bases so that they can be ready for a tournament. They're not going to want to spend a lot of time in the story mode learning random bits from random characters that they're not going to play as. The most that they're going to get out of playing the story mode is learning, okay, this is what Cyborg is strong as. What's my character going to do to get past Cyborg? And they can just do that in the lab. It's much more efficient for them to just drop the $8, grab Brainiac, and start labbing. That's what this is all about, is efficiency. Now, microtransactions appeal to both sides, and their success cannot be debated. There's good, there's bad, there's ugly, and there's even examples in the past of times where stuff that microtransactions have done are not that recent. And hell, we've had to deal with worse before, namely the arcades, which were hugely money hungry. So now, where do I stand on this issue? So, because this video is already 45.5 minutes long and we have to wrap this up before SHAREfactory tells me I can't make it, there's an hour-long limit in the program that I use, SHAREfactory, I'll just get to the final bits. Where do I stand on microtransactions and DLC, I suppose, because that's kind of what this video has turned into. And a couple of genres of games that like microtransactions and others that don't. I'll explain what that means when we get there. Real quick, where do I stand on microtransactions? Generally, not a bad thing. Are they the worst thing in the world? Hell no. Are they the best thing in the world? Hell no. They're another thing. Like science, like technology, like episodes of The Office. They're just things that exist. Whether they're good or whether they're bad, it all depends on the user of those things. Let's put it this way. Where is my hammer? Do I not have it in here anymore? Damn it, I don't. Okay, I got a good example. Perfect. Take a brick. Don't ask why I have a brick lying around. But take a brick. This can be used to build housing. This can be used to help create something. Or you can use it to destroy stuff. A brick is a brick. What you do with a brick is what matters. A microtransaction isn't intrinsically evil. Just like this Volcarona card is not intrinsically evil. How you use it is how it is. If you use microtransactions properly and use them in a good way that's sparse, in a sparing use that doesn't affect gameplay all that much, like the source crystals from Injustice 2, you have a good microtransaction. But if you have to use microtransactions to win, if you can buy gear with Injustice 2, and that gear that you buy can be monumentally important in order to win, that would be wrong. And that would be very, very bad. Now, the other thing that has to be done about microtransactions in this case is it's very, very tempting with something like Injustice 2 to say, let us buy gear sets. No. That cannot happen. If you're not familiar, there are some gear that are part of a set. Like, soon there will be a Wonder Woman specific multiverse event that lets you get Wonder Woman gear that she wears in the new Wonder Woman movie that's coming out. Let's use that as an example. Let's suppose you get that tiara from the Wonder Woman movie, and you also have the chest piece and the boots, but you want the weapons, and you also want the bracers. You're so close. You might be inclined to think, man, if only I could buy the rest of the set. Don't. Don't think like that, because that is the stepping stone towards it being bad. So, in general, microtransactions, they're not that bad. It's how they're implemented that matters. Now, the last thing I'm going to cover. There's a couple of genres that I think microtransactions were great in. Role-playing games, especially of the MMO type, which you MMO people probably have had to deal with microtransactions for years now. Fighting games, they kind of work. They're not that different from, like I said, the coins from Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance for the Crypt. They're not all that different. Genres that don't like microtransactions, any action-adventure game or any single-player-based game. The Last of Us, Horizon Zero Dawn, God of War. Those games are single-player based, and microtransactions would not really work out well for them. At least I would think. But since we're quickly running out of time, I have to know. What do you guys think? Do you guys think that microtransactions are intrinsically evil? Intrinsically good? Do you have a gray area where you stand? How do you feel about maybe the return of an expansion pack system for games instead of standard DLC now? Or what about going back to the arcade days? What if would you like to play games in an arcade where you have to spend quarters in order to play those games. And a question I asked earlier that I really want to ask again, have you had any horror stories from free-to-play microtransactions or anything like that? I really want to know what you guys think. Please comment down below. Feel free to like this video and subscribe. And for the first time, I'm doing an end card where well, you know what an end card is at this point. It's basically where I point to other videos in Jive. So go and check these out if you'd like. I should have a Chamber of the Wraith video and a gameplay video so you can kind of see what I'm doing. And as always, DFTBA, folks. Jesus Christ, 51 minutes?